Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Everyday Caregiver Heroes series. I'm joined here by Tao. Tao, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
My name is Tal. I had a father who had dementia for about 8 years. I was his primary caregiver. I also had some help in the house, and also that we did go to care homes for a while. Um, and I'm sharing my story on Instagram. Um, my account is My Dad Has Dementia, and that's how you guys found me.
Amazing. Yeah, and we will definitely drop Tao's Instagram handle in the description so you can go and follow her there. Um, so, Tao, can you tell us how long you were a caregiver? And if comfortable, can you walk me through that diagnosis experience?
Sure. Uh, I think when my father turned 80, I started noticing some signs. And at that time, I actually moved out of state. I lived in New York and I moved to Portland, Oregon. So uh, I thought he could use some help, but I didn't think it was going to be bad for a really long time. I thought, oh, you have about like 10 years before something really bad might happen. But actually, within 2 years, I had to move. I had to move back. I was only in Portland for a year, but 2 years from the time I started noticing problems, and and then I became like a full time caregiver, living in his house. I gave up my career, and um, and I lived with him, and we also hired some help, but it was full time for 2 years, and then after 2 years, I moved him to Oregon, where I still had my place. And there he was able to be in like a care home, and it was across the street from my apartment, which was crazy that it was so convenient. Um, and me and my dog, had a different dog at the time, we went to visit him every day and hang out. So I was still very much in the caregiving role, even though I wasn't doing the cleaning and I wasn't doing the cooking. I was hanging out with him, all day with our dog. And um, after that, we went to other situations, but at the very end, um, he did live with me again because I really wanted to. I could see that he was declining in a way that I actually felt very safe about, because in the beginning with the caregiving, he was a wanderer, and it was very hard to keep him in the house, and that's actually what made me have to put him somewhere, because sometimes either me or the caregiver that was hired, like, we would just look the other way and he would be halfway down the block, or it was very hard to kind of control him because he really wanted to go out, and he didn't know that he had a problem, and he was unwilling to cooperate. But when he finally was unable to walk, then I wanted him back in my place, because now that he wasn't a risk, and I was excited to take care of him, but I actually thought I had much more time with him, but I didn't. I only had about 10 days when I felt like I had another year or two. So when I looped back around to be a full-time caregiver, then we didn't really have that time.
Okay, I see. I guess in the days that you did spend with your father, what was kind of your day-to-day routine? And did that change when after the diagnosis, or how did that go for you?
When we were living together in the same house, my goal in life was to entertain him and to give him as much fun as he wanted. Anything that he had ever expressed to me that he wanted, I tried to like make it happen, like a little Make-A-Wish foundation in our house. Like, he really liked birds, so I bought him a canary. And I like every little anything that he had mentioned that he had ever wanted, I tried to make it happen. He didn't really like the canary at the end, so I had to I ended up giving it away to the vet. But we had chickens. I tried everything to entertain him and make him happy. So that was my goal. And then he did go to like daycare during the day. He felt like he didn't like it at first, but then he thought that he had a role there as a worker. And he really liked to work. He was a very ambitious person. So our routine was like 3 times a week he would go to daycare, and actually we were very much on a schedule like you would be with a child. Meals, bedtimes, showering. I think I lost sight of your question now.
Yeah, no, I was just interested in kind of the day-to-day routine, and you did touch on those things, but it seems like you were very close with him and engaged in a lot of his activities.
Yeah.
For sure. And when you kind of look back on that, what was some of the highlights of your experiences with your father? Like what were the rewarding aspects?
Um, I really got to see my father. I mean, I always knew he was an amazing person, but one of the things I really got to see about him was truly his who he was as his soul, who his soul was, which was, I mean, this is a man who couldn't string a sentence together after a while, but like when you walked into a room, if he had food in front of him, he would insist that you had something to eat before he would even touch his food. He would insist, and it was so beautiful. Like he just wanted to help people. Always, he wanted to be there for someone else, and that didn't change during dementia. But it got amplified. Um, and I mean, I always knew that about him, but it was so beautiful to see.
Mm-hmm.
And he was always asking about other people, even though he couldn't remember anything. He would ask, oh, how's this person? How's that person? But he had trouble remembering anything else. But people who were important to him, he was checking up on. It was so beautiful. That's the highlight. But I would say that there was a lot of disappointment as well, mostly because he was agitated a lot. And when I was in the full-time caregiving role, he was often angry with me. So actually it was so exciting once he was in a care home, because then he was angry with them. And then I came in as like a visitor, and I would play music for him, and we would laugh and have fun and joke around and take naps, and I was like his best friend again. And I hated being in that caregiver role. He used to call me a Nazi for not letting him out of the house. Oh, it was so upsetting. I
Right.
was so excited to let someone else be the Nazi.
That's amazing. Yeah, you were like your father's best friend. I love that. Um, I guess in terms of like you kind of going off some of the challenging parts of caregiving, did you experience any, I guess, caregiver burnout, or how did you, and if you did, like how did you deal with that?
Well, again, I did have help. So it wasn't 100% on my shoulders. We were just lucky to be in a position where I could hire someone. And I think the rules were also very different at the time that I did the hiring. I think now if you're paying for overnight help, you have to pay more money. But back then, because you have that, like you can't have like a passive, someone is sleeping there, and so that's passive pay. You now, if someone is there, you have to pay for every hour that they're there. I think that's, I'm not sure, it could be wrong, but I had read something about that. That being said, we were in a position to pay for help in the house. But I was burnt out emotionally. I was very depressed the entire time he had dementia. When I moved into his home, which was my childhood home, when I moved into that place, I didn't get out of bed for 2 months. 2 full months. I didn't get out of bed. I was so depressed just to see him changing and not being like this robust man that he always was, in control of everything. And he was the person I came to when I had a problem. And now I didn't have that person anymore. And that was so psychologically distressing that I shut down for, I would say, the full 8 years and a little extra. But especially during during the beginning. So I was just dealing with my own depression. Um, and, but I did do something for myself during those first 2 years that was actually very helpful. I lived in New York, so I used to drive into the city and take drawing classes. And it was like the one time, I do that twice a week. And that was the one time in 2 times during the week that I could focus on something other than him, because I needed to really focus to draw. So I would get into like a meditative state, and then I would feel so much relief when I got home. I'd still kind of be buzzing from that quiet, having a quiet mind and not thinking about him. And even after drawing, I'd go out to like get a cocktail all by myself. I just wanted peace and quiet. And it was really nice. That was actually the one thing that really, really helped me.
That's amazing. Yeah, and I love that you kind of found your outlet. And yeah, and that's what you enjoyed doing, which was amazing. I guess those are all the questions that I had. I'm gonna hand it over to Betsy, and she's gonna ask you a couple more questions as well.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you so much for those great questions. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Before I begin, I just want to extend my condolences to you and your family. Like, your story and relationship was absolutely beautiful with you and your father, and the community you have created online was absolutely phenomenal. As I was scrolling through your page, I recognized the caregivers that you have touched and you have connected with, and that is something that's so very special that I think is something just very, very heartwarming.
Thank you so much. It's very kind of you to say. Thank you.
And
Ooh,
on that topic, what advice would you give to other caregivers?
what advice would I give to other caregivers? It's actually a really good question. Because I try not to give advice, but I'm not really qualified to give advice, but I think I would say make sure that you're taken care of, that you take care of yourself, because you're the leader of this whole operation. If you're the caregiver, you're the leader, and the leader has to survive. You have to. My mantra during that whole time was, you just need to live one day longer than him, just one day longer than him, and then the whole thing could fall apart. But just survive one day longer. So that's my advice. Do what you have to do to survive. If you have to make hard decisions that you think that maybe they wouldn't like, you still have to make that decision because you're the leader and you have to survive. So that's probably the best advice I can give someone.
That's absolutely beautiful. And I loved hearing how you went to art classes and drawing classes and having that mental focus, because I feel like taking time for yourself is something so important that everyone loses track of when you're in that state of just caregiving itself. It's very taxing to a point because, yeah, you just really got to extend that love to others, but most importantly, yourself first.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so true.
And also, what support services did you use? If you wished any were available during your caregiving experience, what do you just wish was out there for you?
Um, in the beginning, when we were living together, he was going to daycare, and they would come and scoop him up and then take him and then bring him back, just like kids in school, like little kids in school. And I felt that like where we were living, it was hard to find a program that was doing that 5 to 7 days a week, but he really could have used it, just to keep him sharp and keeping him socialized, and also giving me and the caregiver a break, because we really needed that, and it was worth whatever they were asking to put him in daycare. But I felt that, I don't know if it's like this in every community, but I felt that those resources were really scarce. The place that he really liked was only open like 3 days a week, and then at some point they said it was only going to be open 2 days a week. So we lost that resource, but it's kind of the most important resource for someone in the earlier stages, when they're still, maybe when they can still walk. So I would say that's something that was incredible. I love now that like there are so many options for tagging someone if like they're, like if they get lost, they can have some sort of bracelet. My dad was, he was sick so long ago, we just didn't have the technology. So that would have been a big relief for me, I think, to just know where he was. I was very worried. Luckily, I had a dog that was also watching my father. And at one time, my dad, he escaped. My dad escaped, and the dog came and got me. And then like we went and chased him down the block. It was just like, that was my technology at the time. But I really would have been happy for like one of these like Apple, I don't know what they're called, these little chips, but that you can just like wear around your neck. That would have been exciting. I don't know. I think those are the two resources that I really could have, and for myself, not for him, but for myself, I really, really would have wanted to know other people going through it. Speaking to other caregivers, I understand that they're going through this too. There's a lot of abandonment in this experience. Like when someone finds out that someone has dementia, instead of like clamoring around them to help, people get really nervous about it and really scared and don't really want to deal with it. So I don't know. I would have really liked to have more of a support group for myself, even if it were people that I didn't know, just to know that we were all going through it and I could talk to someone. That really would have been helpful.
Yeah, for sure. And the first point that you touched on, just having that support for caregiving isn't just providing that shelter in that home, but it's also really engaging with who you're caregiving and really having that relationship with them. I feel like that's also really important. And I feel like that's something that you highlighted throughout this episode, is having that relationship and bond and connection. I feel like that's something so special, and that's really important to the whole story behind it. So that's awesome that you shared that with me. Also, I know you touched on the technology that you wished you had before, which is technology tracking devices, but do you have other technology that would play a role in caregiving that you think would greatly benefit caregivers as well as other people in this situation? Where do you know of any other social media platforms that you think people should engage with to really feel that sense of community?
Other social media platforms?
Yeah, like as in like any profiles that you've been in contact with during your journey, or any Facebook groups that you joined, anything like that.
When I was going through it, I didn't even know there was a possibility, because like it was so long ago. I think even Facebook was very young at the time. He died in 2013. And so really we started in like 2008. which I think is like a long time ago. I didn't really even think to go onto Facebook to find resources. I don't think it was social. There was like, I didn't maybe realize that social media was a possibility. And also I happened to have been like I was so angry. I was a therapist. I have a master's in social work, and I wouldn't go to a therapist the entire time because I was like, no one can help me. I just want my father back, and I don't want to be made to feel better. I want him to be better. That's like social work, therapy can't help me. But so I really didn't get resources. I didn't connect to resources that I really should have, that actually would have made me feel better, but I was just like, had dug my heels in. But I think your app, if that was around when I was going through it, I think that would have been a big help, actually. Yeah, like just because you're connecting people, you're helping people track things. I was like so scattered. It's hard when you're under that much stress, you know. It's not just about caring for someone. That's the issue. It's sometimes you're dealing with a belligerent person who's actually much stronger than you. And you have the guilt of they're your parent, and that you're used to them telling you what to do and listening. And now you have to make decisions that you know that they wouldn't be pleased about. And that is super taxing.
For sure, for sure. Well, it is awesome that you took on the initiative to build your own community nowadays. And I guess technology has its pros and cons, and this is definitely a highlight that technology could be providing to caregivers. So honestly, the community that you built, as check out the description below for the handle, but as I was looking at it, you honestly created a fabulous community. So yeah,
Thank
I
you
just wanna
so much.
give you a round of applause for that.
I was really, my whole goal was, I really wanted to give people something that I would have wanted. I promised myself that once I had gotten out of this whole thing, that I would come back and do something for people that were in my position, because it was so devastating, so derailing. I can't say that there's anything in my life that has touched me with such an impact. I couldn't just walk out of it and never look back. So I decided to do something. So thank you. I really appreciate it. I really hope that the people who are connected that way, that they're benefiting from it somehow. And I would like to figure out more ways that I can help people. I'm just kind of in the beginning of it. So I'm just feeling people out and seeing, you know, where someone could use the help, and what I could do.
You're such a
Thank you so
beautiful
much. I
soul.
really
Throw that in. I love that. Yeah, before we close off this episode, do you just have anything that you want to add, that any going back to just advice, where any last comments that you want to make for those listening today?
I guess I really want people to know that, like, you don't need to be the perfect caregiver. I think we all want to be. And we want to be there. Like, we feel guilty for so many things, feeling like we weren't there that day, we didn't show up, we didn't do this and that. And a lot of people are really sitting with a lot of that guilt. And I if I had to give someone advice, I just want to tell them that, like, to be a little easier on themselves. No one can be expected to be there all the time. It's just not viable. You have to take care of yourself. You have to make space for yourself. And sometimes that means you have to walk away from the situation for a little while so that you're not overwhelmed. And that I understand that. I understand that as a caregiver. But I know that people are so harsh on themselves, and people who are not in it, sometimes it can be very judgmental. And I really hope that I could be like a little voice in their head saying, you don't have to be this hard on yourself. It doesn't benefit you, you know.
Yeah, that honestly is a beautiful message. And I think that's also the message we're trying to share behind Memoryz as well. Show yourself some love. Like you've been giving out love all day, every day for the longest time, especially in the caregiving field. It's kind of nonstop. You don't really have a clock where you punch in and punch out. So honestly, go and give yourself some love and yeah, support each other through these times. I completely echo everything that you just said. But thank you so much, Tal, for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Of course. And thank you, listeners, for joining us on this episode of Everyday Caregiving Heroes, and see you in the next episode.